Junko Furuta, a high school student born in Misato in the Saitama prefecture in Japan, was just 17 years old when she was abducted, tortured and raped over a period of 40 days and eventually killed by her tormentors. She was the victim of one of the most horrific crimes that ever happened in Japan. Stay tuned if you want to know about her story. We are in the year 1988. Junko attended Yashio Minami High School and worked a part-time job to be able to save up money for a graduation trip she had planned. Although being described as a bit shy, she was well liked by her peers due to her loving nature regardless. Junko lived with her parents and two brothers and was a good student with high grades and a promising future ahead. She also accepted a job at an electronics retailer where she planned on working after graduation. All in all, Junko seemed to be happy in life, having plans for the future and dreaming of becoming an idol singer. But her future and her dreams are about to be shattered. The night she was kidnapped, Junko had been looking forward to watching the final episode of the television show Tonbo, which translates to Dragonfly. The main character in this show is a Yakuza gang member. Little did she know that her murderer would be one with ties to said gang, Hiroshi Miyano. To make any kind of sense of it, I need to talk about the relationship Junko had with Hiroshi, with whom she was in the same class in school. Junko had been considered a pretty and interesting girl, so it was not unusual for boys to cast an eye on her. So did Hiroshi. Well, in autumn of 1988, he asked her for a date, which she declined because she did not like him, due to him being unfriendly and having a violent temper. She had no interest in dating a guy like this, especially since he was also known for his ties to the Yakuza. Hiroshi couldn't believe it. He was rejected by Junko. Unable to take it, he developed feelings of hatred towards her. Driven by that hate, he fantasized about taking revenge and making her regret her decision of turning him down. The right occasion to act out on this evil plan turned out to be on the 25th of November 1988. On this day, Hiroshi and a friend of his, by the name of Nobuharu Minato, walked around the streets of Misato with the intention of robbing local women. Around 8:30 p.m., they happened to spot Junko riding her bike after she had finished a shift at her job. Hiroshi seized the opportunity to carry out his evil plan and ordered Nobuharu to kick Junko off her bike and then flee the scene, which he did. Hiroshi then ran to Junko to play the knight in shining armor and made her the offer to walk her home safely. Unsuspecting of the true nature of what just happened and what Hiroshi had in mind, Junko agreed and went with him. Upon gaining her trust, he took her to a warehouse where he raped her and locked her up. That's when Junko was trapped in hell. Hiroshi brought Junko to a hotel where he raped her again. From there, he called Minato and his other friends, Yasushi Watanabe and Yo Ogura. Ogura asked Hiroshi to keep her captive so that more people could sexually assault her. They arranged a meeting in a nearby park around 3 a.m, where Watanabe, Ogura and Minato were already waiting. Upon meeting at the park, they told her they knew where she lived and that they would inform Yakuza members about her home address if she tried to escape. I can't imagine how scared Junko must have been at this point, having been raped already by Hiroshi and now having to fear for her family's lives. The 4 boys then took her to a house in the Ayase district of Adachi, which was owned by Minato's parents. There, they raped and tortured her. On the following night of November the 28th, Hiroshi invited 2 other boys to Minato's house to further abuse Junko. Together they drank cough medicine, acted all high and went to the room where Junko was sitting. She was so scared by their behavior and tried to run away, screaming in fear, but it was all in vain. Hiroshi grabbed her and one of the other boys put a pillow over her face to silence her screams. Minato's parents were awakened by all this noise and went to check on the screams, but Minato told them it was nothing, and then the group proceeded raping her multiple times. During all of this, she was in a state of unconsciousness, not even blinking, and staring at the ceiling with lifeless eyes. She had to endure this agonizing ordeal for more than 40 days, while repeatedly pleading them to finally kill her, which they didn't. Instead, Hiroshi decided to put lighter fluid over Junko's arms and legs, which he then burned after she was forced to smoke multiple cigarettes at once and inhale paint thinner. With each day passing by, Junko got weaker and weaker, eventually suffering from severe malnutrition and infected wounds. Her body was so severely burned and crippled that it started to give off a rotting smell, which led the boys losing interest in her. They subsequently kidnapped another 19-year-old woman and raped her instead. I could go into more detail on the horrible things they did to her, but it's just too terrible to describe. But this should not be about that. What matters to me is that Junko Furuta, her name, her story, will not be forgotten. This, the 4th of January 1989, should be the last day of Junko Furuta's life. Having been held captive for such a long time, having suffered rape and torture of the worst kind, Junko had to go through one last day of the worst humans can do to each other. As terrible as it sounds, winning a game of Mahjong should be Junko's death sentence. Miyano got so angry about her winning the game that he decided to set her body on fire, which Junko made attempts to put it out, but she gradually became unresponsive. Again, they started abusing her body. I won't go into detail on it. It is just too terrible to describe, but due to this abuse, she eventually succumbed to her injuries and died. Fearing of being punished for homicide, they wrapped her body in blankets and shoved her into a travel bag and eventually put her body into a 55 US gallon drum, which they then filled with concrete and disposed of the barrel in an abandoned lot in Wakazu, Koto Ward, Tokyo. Originally, they had planned to drop it into the sea so the police would never find it. During her captivity, Junko told her captors that she regretted not being able to watch the final episode of the series Tonbo. Hiroshi found the videotape of this final episode and placed it into the travel bag. He did this because he feared Junko would return as a ghost and haunt him if he didn't. On the 23rd of January 1989, Hiroshi Miyano and Yo Ogura were arrested for the rape of the 19-year-old woman they assaulted earlier in December. On the 29th of March, 2 policemen from the Ayase district came to interrogate them. Originally, the police suspected them of being involved in another crime. 9 days prior to Junko's disappearance, a woman and her 7-year-old son had been murdered. The case has not been solved during this time and remains unsolved till this day. Hiroshi misunderstood the interrogation and thought this was all about Junko, while thinking that Ogura in a separate room had already confessed to the murder of Junko and that the police were actually suspecting them of being involved in Junko's disappearance. Hiroshi confessed and said, "I'm sorry that we killed." The police then went to the lot Hiroshi described in the confession, where they found a drum with a strange smell. The drum was lifted onto a truck by a crane and taken to the police the following day. Junko's body was found in the drum, badly decomposed, as she had been dead for over 2 months. Edema all over her body, malnutrition, facial features unrecognizable due to severe disfigurement. Eventually, her body had to be identified by fingerprints. To make matters even worse, her autopsy revealed that she was pregnant. After being told about the details of her murder, Junko's mother suffered greatly, had a nervous breakdown, and was ultimately submitted to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. Due to the heinous nature of the crime, the boys were tried as adults in Tokyo's District Criminal Court. However, they have been granted special treatment reserved for juveniles, like hiding their true identities and instead just referring to them as A, B, C, and D, while Junko was referred to as E in court. On July the 20th, 1990, the court held sentencing. All 4 criminals confessed to, as it is called, causing bodily injury resulting in death, rather than pleading guilty to outright murder. The court sentenced Miyano, who they considered as the leader of the pack, to 20 years in prison, the maximum sentence before life imprisonment. Ogura received 8 years in juvenile prison. Minato and Watanabe received 5 and 7 years, and 5 to 9 years, respectively. There was a huge public outcry criticizing the sentencing, which in the eyes of many was way too light, considering the vile nature of the crime they committed. Phone calls and letters literally flooded the Tokyo District Court. Most of them demanded the death sentence. Even in the eyes of the media, the sentencing was a failing of Japan's juvenile law. Adding to that, the Furuta family filed a civil suit against the Minato family and won. The Minato family paid reparations after selling their home. But at the end of the video, I want to raise the question whether Junko received justice or not. Personally, I don't think so. At least I would have expected the court to treat them as adults, so that the sentencing could be more appropriate to the crime they committed. But the court didn't. They even granted them special treatment reserved for juveniles, which, in my opinion, was absolutely the wrong thing to do. Totally undeserved. One remark here at this point: Japan is a country that still uses the death penalty in its legal system. And I think the death penalty could have been the right answer to this crime. Well, let me know what you think about all of this. Please write it in the comments. I'm looking forward to reading it. And thanks for watching. See you in the next video.